The stars had watched humanity for 80 years. In all that time, the great species of the galaxy had never taken the small creatures from Earth seriously. They were too young, too weak, too emotional. The Galactic Assembly had allowed humans to join their union, but only as observers. They could watch. They could listen. They could not vote. Admiral Ho stood at the window of his ship, the Iron Wake, and stared at the distant lights of 1,000 worlds. He was 63 years old. His hair had turned long ago, and deep lines marked his face. He had served in the fleet for 40 years, waiting for a war that he hoped would never come. Now it was here. The message had arrived 3 hours ago. Myra 7 had fallen. Myra 7 was a small colony on the edge of human space. 40,000 people lived there. Farmers, teachers, children. They had built homes in the red soil and planted gardens under an alien sun. They had done nothing wrong. But the End wanted that world. They called it resource redistribution. They said the humans were using land that belonged to the Assembly, so they sent their ships. They forced the colonists onto transport vessels. They gave them 6 hours to leave everything behind. 2,000 people died. Some were old and could not survive the journey. Some were sick and received no medicine. Some were children who simply could not understand why strangers were taking them from their homes. Ho closed his eyes. He could see their faces. He could hear their cries, and he felt something cold settle in his chest. It was not anger. Anger was hot and wild. This was different. This was patient. This was certain. His communicator buzzed. Admiral, Ambassador Sungwoo is on the line. Ho turned from the window, put him through. The hologram flickered to life. Sungwoo looked exhausted. He was a tall man with kind eyes, but today those eyes were empty. He had spent 20 years trying to make peace with the galaxy. He had smiled at creatures who laughed at him. He had bowed to beings who saw him as an animal. He had believed that patience would bring respect. He did not believe that anymore. "It is done," Sungwoo said. "I delivered our declaration to the Assembly." Ho nodded slowly. How did they respond? Sungwoo laughed, but there was no joy in it. They laughed. The representative said we were barely sentient. He said we should be grateful they did not wipe us out years ago. The ambassador told me to go home and tend to our gardens. And the others? The said nothing. The watched with their ancient eyes and offered no words. The Assembly sees us as insects, Ho. They think this is a joke. Ho was quiet for a long moment. Outside his window, the stars continued to burn. They did not care about the affairs of small creatures. They simply watched. "Then we will teach them," Ho said. "We will teach them that insects can sting." On the assembly station, the great hall was filled with noise. Representatives from 100 species talked and laughed about the human declaration. It was the most entertainment they had enjoyed in years. They were especially amused. They were massive creatures, covered in thick armor that no weapon could pierce. They had conquered a dozen species. They had crushed rebellions that lasted centuries. The idea that humans could challenge them was absurd. High Commander stood among his officers, his heavy arms crossed over his chest. "Send a disciplinary fleet," he ordered. 200 ships should be enough. Burn their outer colonies. That will end this foolishness. His officers laughed. One of them, a younger named, shook his head. 200 ships for humans. That is generous, Commander. 50 would be enough. Smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I want this finished quickly. The Assembly should not have to think about humans for another century." Far from the Assembly, on a quiet moon orbiting a dead world, Captain stood before her crew. She was young for a captain, only 32, but she had earned her rank through blood and fire. She commanded the Unyielding, the first true dreadnought humanity had ever built. It was a monster of metal and light, carrying weapons the galaxy had never seen. Her crew watched her with steady eyes. They were afraid, she could see it, but they were also ready. "You have heard the news," said. Her voice was calm and clear. "The Assembly has rejected our call for justice. They have laughed at our pain. They think we are weak." She paused and looked at each face before her. Engineers, pilots, soldiers, doctors, they came from every nation on Earth. They spoke different languages and followed different gods, but in this moment they were one. "They do not know us," continued. "They do not know what we carry in our hearts. They see small bodies and short lives. They do not see what those bodies can do. They do not understand what short lives can achieve when every moment matters." She raised her hand and the lights in the room dimmed. A hologram appeared, showing the approaching fleet. 200 warships, each one larger than the Unyielding. "They are coming to teach us a lesson," said. "Instead, they will learn one. They will learn that humanity does not break. We bend, we bleed, we fall, but we always rise again." In the silence that followed, a young engineer named stepped forward. He was thin and nervous, with messy hair and oil-stained hands. He had never been a soldier. He had never wanted to fight. But he had built something that would change everything. "Captain," he said, "the Cascade bombs are ready. All 40 ships are armed." Nodded. "Good, then we are ready too." She turned back to the window and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, the fleet was moving toward them. They were laughing. They were certain of victory. They had no idea what was coming. Admiral Ho received the final orders from Earth Command. He read them once, then set the tablet down. His hands did not shake. His heart did not race. He had known this day would come. He opened a channel to every human ship in the fleet. His voice reached thousands of men and women, scattered across the cold darkness of space. "This is Admiral Ho. The war has begun. Fight well, die if you must, but make them remember us. Make them remember that they should never have touched our people." He closed the channel and sat in his command chair. The stars burned on, silent and eternal. And humanity went to war. The fleet arrived at Hello's station on a cold morning in March. 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and formed a perfect wall of metal and fire. Each ship was a mountain of armor and weapons, built to crush anything that stood against it. Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Tide. He was old for nearly 300 years, and he had seen many battles. He had burned worlds. He had broken fleets. He had never lost. "Scan the area," he ordered. "Find the human ships." His officers worked quickly. The screens flickered with data. Then one of them looked up, confused. "Commander, we detect only 40 human vessels." Laughed. The sound was deep and terrible, like stones grinding together. 40? They send 40 ships against 200. He shook his massive head. "These creatures are even more foolish than I thought. Open a channel. I will give them one chance to surrender." The channel opened. On the other end, Captain sat in her command chair, her face calm and her eyes steady. She looked small on the screen. Fragile, human. "Human Commander," said, "you are surrounded and outmatched. Surrender now and we will show mercy. Your people will be relocated to labor colonies. You will serve the assembly for the rest of your short lives. This is generous. Accept it." Tilted her head slightly. A small smile touched her lips. "No." Blinked. "No. Do you understand what you face? We will destroy you in minutes." "Perhaps," said, "but I do not think so. You see, Commander, you have made a mistake. You have studied our ships. You have counted our weapons, but you have not studied us." She leaned forward. "Humans do not surrender, we do not serve, and we do not die quietly." The channel closed, stared at the empty screen for a moment, then shrugged. "Destroy them. Leave no survivors." The fleet moved forward, weapons charging. 200 ships against 40. It should have been over in moments. It was not. Lieutenant sat at the tactical station of the Unyielding, her fingers dancing over the controls. She was 28 years old, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She had studied every battle in human history. She had memorized the tactics of Alexander and Napoleon, She had learned how small forces could defeat larger ones. Now she would teach that lesson to the galaxy. "All ships execute Pattern 7, she said into her communicator. "On my mark." The weapons fired. Beams of energy and missiles streaked toward the human fleet. The attacks should have destroyed half the ships in seconds. But the human ships were not there. They blinked. One moment they existed in normal space. The next they vanished. They reappeared behind the formation, weapons already firing. Stumbled as his ship shook from impacts. "What? How did they?" "They jumped," one of his officers shouted. "Short-range faster-than-light jumps. They are appearing inside our formation." This was impossible. No species used FTL in combat. The calculations were too complex, the timing too precise. One mistake would scatter a ship across 1,000,000 kilometers of space. But humans had done it. They had practiced for years in secret. They had built computers that could calculate jump points in milliseconds. They had trained pilots to trust machines with their lives. And now they were everywhere. The human ships danced through the fleet like ghosts. They appeared, fired, and vanished. They struck from above, below, and behind. They could not track them. They could not predict them. Captain watched the battle unfold from her chair. Her heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. "Is the Cascade bomb ready?" The young engineer nodded. His face was pale, but his hands were firm on the controls. "Ready, Captain. Target is the crushing tide." "Fire." The bomb launched. It was small, no larger than a person, but it carried the power of a dying star. Had spent 5 years building it. He had stolen ideas from physics textbooks and fever dreams. He had created something that should not exist. The bomb struck the crushing tide. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the ship began to glow. The glow spread to the ships around it. Energy cascaded from hull to hull, growing brighter and hotter. Had time for one final thought before his ship tore itself apart. He thought of his. He thought of the warm sun on his scales. He thought of his children. Then there was only light. The explosion consumed 60 ships in an instant. The shockwave damaged dozens more. The survivors scattered, their formation broken, their confidence shattered. Did not give them time to recover. All ships Pattern 12, hunt them down. The human fleet pursued. They were faster, they were smarter, and they had no mercy. 6 hours later, it was over. 180 ships had been destroyed. 20 had escaped, fleeing into deep space with damaged engines and dying crews. The human fleet had lost 8 ships, 342 lives. Captain stood on her bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of victory. She felt no joy, only a deep, heavy tiredness. "Send a message to all channels," she said. "Make sure the entire galaxy sees what happened here." The footage spread across the stars. It reached the assembly station, where representatives watched in stunned silence. It reached where diplomats whispered in fear. It reached the trading posts, where merchants began making new calculations. And it reached the temples, where the ancient psychics opened their eyes and felt the shape of the future. Elder Morrow was 900 years old. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had touched the minds of 1,000 species. He thought he understood the galaxy. But when he watched the battle footage, he felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. "They did not fight for survival," he whispered to his students. "They fought for revenge. They fought for honor. They fought for the dead." He closed his ancient eyes. "The galaxy has made a terrible mistake. These humans, they are not like us. They carry their pain with them. They use it as fuel. They will not stop until they have reshaped everything." On the assembly station, the laughter had ended. The representative sat in silence, unable to speak. The ambassador had left the room. The halls were quiet. Only one sound broke the stillness. It was a message from Earth, broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Admiral Ho's voice filled the silence, calm and cold. "You called us insects. You called us barely sentient. You laughed at our pain and took our homes. Now you have seen what insects can do. This was just the beginning. We are coming for all of you, not to conquer, not to enslave, to remind you that every species, no matter how small, deserves respect." He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. "You should have left us alone." The message ended. The galaxy held its breath. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the human fleet was already moving toward its next target. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Hello Station. The galaxy was burning. They had joined the war, sending their elegant ships to fight alongside the. Together, they outnumbered humanity 10-1. They had more ships, more soldiers, more resources. Every calculation said they should win. But calculations did not account for humans. The war spread across 100 worlds. Human fleets struck without warning, disappeared before reinforcements could arrive, and struck again somewhere else. They did not fight like other species. They did not form lines and march forward. They moved like water, flowing around obstacles, finding weaknesses, and crashing through with terrible force. Elder Morrow watched the reports from his temple on the. His ancient mind tried to understand what he was seeing. They were the oldest species in the assembly. They had developed psychic abilities over millions of years. They could read thoughts, see glimpses of the future, and touch the minds of any creature in the galaxy. Or so they had believed. "Bring me the prisoners," Morrow said to his assistants, "the human prisoners." They brought 3 humans to his chamber, 2 soldiers and a pilot. They had been captured when their ship crashed on a trading post. They were wounded, tired, and far from home. Morrow studied them with his dark, ancient eyes. They seemed so fragile. Their skin was soft. Their bones were weak. Their lives lasted less than a century. How could such creatures cause so much damage? He reached out with his mind. He had touched the thoughts of 1,000 species. He had controlled armies with his will. He had broken the minds of rebels and criminals with a single thought. The first human mind he touched was the pilot. Her name was. She was 26 years old. She had been a journalist before the war. Morrow pushed into her thoughts and immediately recoiled. It was chaos, pure, overwhelming chaos. Her mind was not organized like other species. It was a storm of memories, emotions, fears, and hopes all tangled together. He saw her childhood. He saw her first love. He saw her grandmother dying. He saw her anger at the assembly. He saw her love for her younger brother. He saw her fear of death and her determination to face it anyway. All of this hit him at once, in a single moment, with the force of a crashing wave. He tried to take control. He tried to impose his will on her mind, but there was nothing to grab. The chaos shifted and changed, adapting to his touch, sliding away from his grip. Looked at him, her eyes were steady. "Are you in my head, old one?" Morrow could not answer. He was struggling just to maintain contact. "You can look," she said, "but you will not find what you are searching for. We are not like you. We do not have quiet minds. We carry everything with us. Every joy, every sorrow, every person we have loved and lost. It makes us messy, but it also makes us strong." Morrow from her mind. His hands were shaking. He had not felt fear in 300 years. He felt it now. "Take them away," he whispered. Later, he called a meeting of the council. The greatest psychics of his species gathered in the ancient hall, their minds linked in silent communication. "I have touched the humans," Morrow said. "I cannot control them." The council stirred with disbelief. They had controlled other species for millions of years. This was supposed to be impossible. "Their minds are different," Morrow continued. "They are not ordered, they are emotional. They carry their entire lives inside them, every memory, every feeling, all at once. We cannot grab hold of such minds. We cannot predict them. We cannot stop them." One of the younger council members spoke. "Then what do they fight for? Territory, resources, power?" Morrow shook his head slowly. "No, I saw it in the pilot's mind. They fight because they were wronged. They fight for revenge, but not just that. They fight for justice. They fight for the dead. They fight for children they have never met and people they will never know. He paused, his voice dropped to a whisper. They fight because they remember. Every insult, every death, every moment of suffering. They store it all and they use it as fuel. They will not stop until they have made us pay for everything we have done to them. The council was silent. Morrow looked at each of them in turn. The assembly must make peace. Now, before it is too late, these humans. They are not a threat to be crushed. They are a force of nature to be survived. But the assembly did not listen. They were too proud. They were too afraid to show weakness. They believed that greater numbers would eventually win. They were wrong. On the front lines, Colonel Bora led her special operations team through the darkness of a command station. They had infiltrated the station through a garbage disposal chute, crawling through filth for 6 hours to reach the central core. Bora was 40 years old. She had been a police officer before the war. She had spent her life protecting people. Now she spent her life killing them. She did not enjoy it, but she was very good at it. Her team moved in silence. 10 soldiers, each one trained for years. They carried no heavy weapons, only knives, small explosives, and their own hands. They did not believe infiltration was possible. Their stations were too well defended. Their sensors were too advanced. They had never faced an enemy who would crawl through sewage for 6 hours, who would starve themselves for days to avoid detection, who would die without hesitation to complete a mission. They did not understand humans. Bora reached the command center. Through the glass she could see the officers, tall and graceful, directing the war from comfortable chairs. They looked peaceful, safe. She placed the explosive charges and set the timer. 30 seconds. "Move out," she whispered. Her team retreated through the corridors. Behind them, the explosion ripped through the command center. The station's shields failed. The human fleet waiting outside began their attack. Within an hour, the station was destroyed. 3,000 officers were dead. The entire sector lost coordination for days. Now free and returned to human space, recorded a broadcast about the raid. Her voice reached billions of beings across the galaxy. "They ask how we do it," she said. "They ask why we fight so hard. They think we are monsters. Maybe we are, but we are monsters they created. Every colony they burned, every child they killed, every person they took from their home. We remember them all. We carry them with us. And we will not rest until justice is done." She paused. Her eyes were bright with tears. "We are not fighting for conquest. We are fighting because no one should have to suffer what our people suffered. We are fighting so that no species, no matter how small, will ever be treated like we were treated. And we will win. Not because we are stronger, not because we are smarter, but because we refuse to give up." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, beings watched in silence. Some felt fear, some felt anger, and some, for the first time, felt respect. On the border worlds, the great merchants had already begun evacuating. They were traders, not warriors. They knew when a storm was coming. One old merchant named Vel stood at his window, watching human ships pass in the distance. They did not attack his world. They did not even slow down. They had bigger targets. Vel had lived for 200 years. He had made deals with every species in the galaxy. He had thought he understood power. Now he understood that he had been wrong. "What are they?" his young assistant asked. Vel shook his head slowly. "They are what happens when you push too hard, when you take too much, when you forget that even the smallest creature can bite." He turned from the window. "Pack everything. We are leaving. This war will not end until the assembly is broken, and I do not want to be here when it happens." In the darkness of space, the human fleet continued its march. They had lost thousands. They had won victories and suffered defeats, but they never stopped. They never slowed. And the galaxy slowly began to understand its doom. 3 years of war had broken the galaxy. They had fallen. Their beautiful cities, built over 10,000 years, lay in ruins. The survivors had surrendered, accepting human terms without conditions. They had learned the price of arrogance. Now only the remained. They had retreated to their home system, gathering every ship, every soldier, every weapon they had left. 3,000 warships formed a wall around Prime. Behind them, 1 billion warriors waited on the surface, ready to fight to the last breath. High Commander stood on his new flagship, the Final Roar. He was the greatest general his species had produced in 1,000 years. He had won victories against enemies that should have destroyed him. He had never surrendered. He never would. "They are coming," his officer reported. 1,200 human ships. Nodded slowly. The numbers favored him, 3-1. In any normal war, this would be enough. But this was not a normal war. Admiral Ho sat in his command chair aboard the Iron Wake. He was 66 years old now. The war had aged him. His hair was white. His hands sometimes trembled, but his mind was still sharp and his will was still iron. Beside him stood Admiral One, his former student. One commanded the Second Fleet, 400 ships that had never lost a battle. He was young, only 35, but he had learned well. He fought like his mentor, patient, precise, and merciless. "They are prepared for us," one said. "They have studied our tactics. They know about the FTL jumps. They know about the cascade bombs. They will be ready." Ho smiled slightly. "Then we will show them something new." He opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Ho. Today we face the heart of the enemy. They are strong. They are desperate. They will fight like cornered animals. Many of us will not survive this day." He paused. Across 1,200 ships, men and women listened in silence. "But we will win, not because of our weapons, not because of our tactics. We will win because we fight for something greater than ourselves. We fight for our children. We fight for our dead. We fight for every human who was told they did not matter." His voice hardened. "Make them pay for every life they took. Make them understand that humanity is not a species to be dismissed. And when this day ends, let the galaxy remember that we were here and we did not bend." The fleet moved forward. The battle began at dawn on Prime. Human ships poured into the system, their weapons blazing. The fleet met them head-on, determined to hold the line. For the first time, they were ready. They had positioned their ships to counter the FTL jumps. They had shielded their flagships against cascade bombs. They fought with the fury of a species facing extinction. Admiral One led the first assault. His flagship, the Bright Dawn, carved through the enemy formation, guns firing in all directions. Around him, his fleet followed, each ship coordinated perfectly with the others. "Pattern 19, he ordered. "Draw them toward the asteroid field." The human ships retreated, appearing to flee. The pursued, hungry for blood. They did not see the trap until it was too late. Hidden among the asteroids, 200 human ships waited in silence. When the fleet passed, they emerged and attacked from behind. The enemy formation shattered. But they did not break. High Commander his forces. His voice thundered across the communication channels. "They are mortals. They bleed. They die. Show them that they do not fear death." His ships regrouped. They pushed back. The battle became chaos, a swirling mass of fire and metal. Ships exploded on both sides. Thousands died in moments. Admiral Ho watched the battle from the Iron Wake. He saw human ships fall. He saw ships fall. He saw the future of two species being decided in fire. "Send in the reserves," he ordered, "all of them." The last human ships joined the battle. There was no retreat now, no second chance. Everything depended on this moment. Admiral One pushed deeper into the enemy formation, aiming for the final roar. If they could destroy, the command structure would collapse. "All weapons target the flagship," one said. The Bright Dawn fired everything it had. Beams of energy struck the final roar's shields. Missiles exploded against its hull. The flagship shook but did not fall. Responded with fury. His ship's weapons tore through space, striking the bright dawn again and again. The human flagship began to break apart. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, an officer reported. Engines failing. One grabbed his command console as the ship lurched. Around him, crew members were thrown to the floor. Fires burned in the corridors. "Abandon ship," he ordered. "All hands abandon ship." He stayed at his post, guiding his dying ship toward the final roar. If he could ram the enemy flagship, if he could create an opening, the battle might still be won. But escape pods surrounded him. His crew dragged him from the bridge, forced him into a pod, and launched him into space. He watched through the small window as the bright dawn continued forward alone, piloted by a single volunteer who had refused to leave. The ship struck the final roar. The explosion was blinding. When one's vision cleared, both ships were gone. The flagship had been destroyed, and with it High Commander. The fleet wavered. Their greatest leader was dead. Their formation was broken. For the first time in their history, they did not know what to do. Admiral Ho seized the moment. "All ships, maximum assault. Do not let them recover." The human fleet surged forward. Without to coordinate them, the ships began to fall one by one. Some tried to flee. Some surrendered. Most died fighting because that was all they knew how to do. 6 hours later, the battle was over. The human fleet had lost 400 ships. Thousands of men and women had died, but the fleet was destroyed. Prime lay defenseless. Admiral Ho opened a channel to the planet's surface. His voice reached 1 billion warriors, waiting for an invasion that would never come. "This is Admiral Ho of the human fleet. Your fleet is destroyed. Your commander is dead. You have lost." He paused. On the surface, they listened in disbelief. "We could destroy your world. We could burn your cities and salt your fields. We could do to you what you did to our colonies. We choose not to." His voice softened. "We did not start this war. We did not want this war, but we finished it. Now it is over. Lay down your weapons. Surrender your leaders to human justice. Accept the terms we offer and your species will survive. Refuse, and we will have no choice but to finish what you started." There was a long silence. On the planet below, 1 billion warriors looked at each other. They had been taught that surrender was death. They had been told that humans were weak creatures who would show no mercy. But the humans were offering mercy. After everything, they were offering a chance to live. One by one, the commanders signaled their acceptance. Weapons were lowered, ships powered down. The war was ending. Admiral One was rescued from his escape pod 3 hours later. He was brought to the Iron Wake, where Ho waited for him. "You lost your ship," Ho said. "I know." One looked exhausted. His uniform was torn, his face was burned. "I am sorry." Ho shook his head. "Do not apologize. You destroyed their flagship. You broke their spirit. You won this battle." He put his hand on One's shoulder. "You have learned well. Now rest. The war is almost over, but the hard work is just beginning." On a quiet moon far from the battle, listened to the news. She was a civilian, a teacher who had become a leader of refugees. She had spent 3 years helping survivors rebuild their lives on liberated worlds. She had seen the worst of the war. Now she would help build the peace. She looked at the children playing in the courtyard below. Human children, even a few young, orphaned by the war. They did not care about species or history. They only wanted to play. Smiled, perhaps there was hope after all. 5 years had passed since Ambassador Sungwoo stood before the Galactic Assembly and declared war. The old assembly was gone now. Its great hall stood empty, a monument to arrogance and cruelty. In its place, humanity had built something new. They called it the New Accord. Every species had an equal voice. Every world had equal rights. No one would ever again be dismissed as barely sentient. No colony would ever again be destroyed for resources. The rules were enforced by the human fleet. They did not conquer, they did not occupy, they simply watched, and everyone knew what would happen if the rules were broken. Ambassador Sungwoo stood at the window of the new council chamber looking out at the stars. He was older now, his hair had turned, his eyes were tired, but they were no longer empty. "Is it ready?" he asked. Admiral nodded. She had been promoted to Fleet Admiral after the war, the youngest in human history. She commanded more ships than any human had ever commanded, but she did not feel powerful. She felt responsible. "The ceremony begins in 1 hour," she said. "Representatives from every species will attend, even the—" Sungwoo turned from the window, and Elder Morrow. "He will speak," he asked to speak. The ceremony was held in a great hall built from the wreckage of the war. Human architects had designed it with help from artists and scholars. It was meant to represent unity, rebirth, a new beginning. Admiral Ho sat in the front row. He was 68 years old. His hands trembled constantly now. His doctors had told him to rest, but he had refused. He needed to see this. He needed to know that everything had meant something. Beside him sat one, now Admiral of the Second Fleet. His burns had healed, leaving faint scars on his face. He wore them proudly. They were proof that he had been there, that he had fought, that he had survived. Was there too, recording everything. Her broadcasts had made her famous across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched her reports, learning about humanity through her eyes. She had become a bridge between species. And was there, surrounded by children of a dozen species. She had continued her work throughout the peace, building schools and hospitals on war-torn worlds. She believed that the future belonged to the young, and she was determined to give them a good one. Elder Morrow walked slowly to the center of the hall. He was over 900 years old. He had seen the rise and fall of empires. He had touched the minds of countless beings, but he had never seen anything like humanity. He stood before the gathered representatives and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the hall. "I have lived for 9 centuries. I have watched species conquer and be conquered. I have seen wars that lasted 1,000 years and peace that crumbled in a single day. I thought I understood the galaxy." He paused. His ancient eyes found the human delegation. "I was wrong. 5 years ago we laughed at humanity. We called them weak. We called them foolish. We took their colonies and killed their children and thought nothing of it. We believed that might made right, that the strong could do whatever they wished to the weak. The humans taught us otherwise." His voice grew stronger. "They did not fight like us. They did not think like us. They carried their pain with them, every memory, every loss, every injustice. They used it as fuel. They burned with a fire we could not understand. We sent fleets against them. They destroyed those fleets. We sent armies. They broke those armies. We tried to touch their minds and control them. We could not. Their thoughts were chaos, but that chaos was their strength. And when they won, when they stood victorious over everything we had built, they did something that shocked us more than any weapon or tactic." He looked at Ho. "They showed mercy. They could have destroyed us. They could have burned our worlds and enslaved our people. We had done the same to others for millions of years. We expected nothing less. But they rebuilt our cities. They healed our wounded. They fed our children. They offered us a place in their new order, not as servants but as equals. That is what makes them terrifying. Not their rage but their restraint. Not their weapons but their wisdom. They are a young species, barely a flicker in the history of the galaxy, but they have taught us something we should have learned long ago. Every creature matters. Every life has value, and those who forget that truth will eventually face those who remember it." He bowed his head. "I speak now to every species in the galaxy. Remember this day. Remember what happens when you push too hard. Remember that even the smallest, youngest, weakest creature can rise up and change everything. The humans did not ask to be our teachers. We forced them into that role through our cruelty. Let us learn the lesson well. Let us never again make the mistakes we made." He stepped back. The hall was silent. Then slowly the applause began. It started with the humans, then spread to the. It filled the hall, a sound of hope and healing. After the ceremony, Admiral Ho gave his final address. He stood before a crowd of thousands, his voice amplified across the galaxy. "My name is Ho. I have served humanity for 50 years. I have fought battles and won wars. I have seen good people die and bad people prosper. I have done things I am proud of and things I regret. Today I retire. My work is done. The galaxy is at peace. But before I go, I want to say something to everyone watching." He paused. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "We did not want this war. We did not choose to be warriors. We were farmers and teachers, artists and dreamers. We wanted to explore the stars and make friends among the species we found there. But when we were attacked, we fought back. When our children were killed, we demanded justice. When the galaxy laughed at us, we made them stop laughing. That is what humans do. We do not start fights, but we finish them." His voice softened. "Now the fighting is over. Now we must build. We must create a galaxy where no species fears another, where children can grow up in peace, where the strong protect the weak instead of crushing them. That is the galaxy we fought for. That is the galaxy we will build. And if anyone tries to destroy it, they will find us waiting." He smiled. "Humanity does not forget, but we can forgive. We offer that forgiveness now to everyone who wronged us, to everyone who hurt us. The past is the past. The future belongs to us all. Let us build it together." He stepped back from the podium. The crowd erupted in cheers. Months later, a merchant named Vel visited Earth for the first time. He had heard stories about the human, but nothing had prepared him for what he found. It was so small, a tiny blue world circling a single star, mountains and oceans, forests and deserts, and everywhere humans. They walked through cities that touched the sky. They sailed on ships that crossed the seas. They played in parks and sang in concert halls. They laughed and cried and loved and fought, just like every other species. But they were different. Vel could see it in their eyes. They carried something that other species lacked, a spark, a fire, a refusal to accept the world as it was. He stopped in a small park and watched a group of children playing. They ran and shouted, chasing each other around trees and fountains. Some were human. Some were. One was a young, awkward on his thick legs but determined to keep up. They did not see enemies. They only saw friends. An old woman sat on a bench nearby, watching them with a gentle smile. Vel recognized her from the broadcasts. It was the teacher who had helped rebuild so many worlds. He approached her carefully. "May I sit?" She nodded, "Of course." Vel sat beside her and watched the children play. "I have traveled the galaxy for 200 years. I have seen many strange things, but I have never seen anything like this." Smiled. "Like what?" "Like humans." He shook his head slowly. "You are so small, so fragile, you live such short lives, and yet you have changed everything." Watched a human boy help the young climb a tree. That was too heavy for the branches, but the boy would not give up. "We do not see ourselves as small," she said. "We see ourselves as big enough to love, big enough to fight, big enough to forgive." She looked at Vel. Her eyes were warm and wise. "That is our secret. That is why we won. We believe that we matter. We believe that everyone matters. And we are willing to fight for that belief until the stars burn out." Vel nodded slowly. He finally understood. Humans were not dangerous because of their weapons or tactics. They were dangerous because of their hearts. They cared too much. They felt too deeply. They refused to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. In the park, the children continued to play. The sun shone down on them, warm and golden. And somewhere in the sky, the stars waited, no longer watching in judgment but in hope. The war was over, the galaxy had been saved. And humanity, the small, fragile, stubborn species from a tiny blue world, had shown everyone what it truly meant to be alive.